Hello. So if you see this video, it means sadly that we probably had problems with the connection, and so we won't have so much interactivity, nor you can see any of my slides. But anyway, I will try to tell you what I want to tell you about the idea of what it's called the hedonic treadmill, and the question: is there a transhumanist perspective to improve our ability to happiness? Well, many people are becoming interested in transhumanism through the question of radical longevity. Will it really be possible to live much longer? But I wonder, why live much longer if it's to continue to be dependent on the same Paleolithic determinism that make us easily aggressive, xenophobic, that make us seek the domination of our neighbor, and that prevent us from being able to feel empathy for more than 100 or 200 people? Moral enhancement, therefore, seems to me a transhumanist perspective at least as important as the drastic expansion lifespan. This mental improvement can affect many aspects, but in recent months I have been thinking about a particular one. Will we be able to improve by technique our ability to experience happiness? And if so, under what conditions could this be a good thing? So the first part is, what is it and what is possible? First, about the biology of pleasure and happiness. Much of this reflection is based on the discoveries made in recent years by neuroscientists who have shown that both what we call pleasure and happiness in terms of psychology are based on physiological complex, but certainly not incompressible. To go very quickly, the feeling of pleasure comes from the functioning of a reward circuit, which is located mainly in our brain. When we act to satisfy one of our needs, neurotransmitter, mainly dopamine, is produced in the brainstem and reinforces our tendency to satisfy the need by providing us with different emotions: heat, vertigo, enjoyment, etc. But once our supply of dopamine is exhausted, the feeling of pleasure fades and may be replaced by frustration. The feeling of happiness seems even more complex. Several studies highlight the role of another neurotransmitter, serotonin. What is striking is that here too we seem unable to exceed a certain level of bliss, of happiness, that is proper to each of us and that varies from individual to individual. We can only oscillate between a low point, depression, and a maximum point of happiness. Once any event has given us this happiness, we fall back into a state of satisfaction or frustration quite stable throughout our life. It is this phenomenon which has been called hedonic treadmill, as we were condemned by our biology to run indefinitely in a hamster wheel after a happiness which is constantly disappearing under our feet. So, is it possible to hack the system? Well, it's on the basis of this observation that some transhumanists, as James Hughes, writing Cyborg Buddha, or Julian Savulescu, with his book Unfit for the Future, who began to wonder if we could have an interest in modifying these balances technically. Now, the enhancement of our faculty of happiness or the escape of suffering by technique is immemorial. Ancient shaman was trying to do it. Moreover, in liberal democracy nowadays, the free pursuit of happiness is recognized as one of the most fundamental human rights, at least since the American Declaration of Independence of 1776, when they wrote that the main rights are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So we have already or chosen to hack the system, to try to hack the system. But 3, we are front of dangers and difficulties. Going in this direction, we will be inevitably meet those dangers and difficulties. Danger of intervention on a physiological process selected by millions of years of Darwinian evolution. The cyclical dimension of pleasure and happiness. Process is probably adaptative. The perpetual return to frustration serves to keep us in a state of alert favorable to our survival. The balance is very complex and fragile. The use of substance to regulate it easily had addictive effects. The factors of balance are so intricate that it seems very difficult to intervene on one without causing effects possibly deleterious on other parts of the system. Above all, we are still very far from understanding at a satisfactory level all the processes involved. So, second part, what to do? This is the ethical question. First, we think that we have to look toward proaction. Medical practice has always offered accompaniment or even therapies based on the experimental approach. And on the other hand, people have always experimented on themselves. Nevertheless, one must constantly worry about the benefit-risk balance. Without prohibiting individual experiments, transhumanists will encourage investment and in institutional research on neuroscience. Still, we find that some people are happier than others. That's a reality. It certainly depends on the family, social and economic context in which they grew up, but it also depends on their physiological balance, from their diet, what they eat, and only until their genetic basis. To improve this capacity, the entire system will have to be upgraded. Continuing struggling on the socio-economic level, but also progress in our technical ability to modulate our moods. In particular, the hypothesis of the serotonin cycle needs to be verified. According to some studies, for example, access of serotonin precursors to the brain may even be at odds with dopamine production. In other words, an excess of pleasure will be contradictory with certain sensation of happiness. On the other part, too, we have social risks. In terms of society, Aldous Huxley's warning with Brave New World has been to ask us if a society where everyone will have access to higher levels of artificial happiness will not tend to have much more conservatism. As everyone is satisfied with this situation, the well-to-do could, on the one hand, be more satisfied with their dominant position, and on the other hand, they might find it more acceptable to meet happy misery. In exchange, the less well-off will be less likely to question the power of the former, a paradise of conservatism. Some might find it highly desirable, and many political, philosophical or religious traditions consider that stability it's the more important, and social harmony are much more important than the fight against inequalities. But the fact remains that these prospects will inevitably appear to the Democrats as the situation dreamed by the current potentate to guarantee above all the durability of their power. This logic, indeed, could push the poorest to choose the pill of happiness rather than continue the social struggle. It can also be argued that inequalities, or differences in satisfaction and frustration, play a driving role in the creativity and inventiveness of individuals and societies. So, will the generalized access to more happiness make us run the risk of a less deleterious dynamism at term? Well, look at social benefits. On the other hand, we must anticipate the collective benefits that could flow from such a capacity. Let us think of what could be a more peaceful, more harmonious, less violent society. Will it not, for example, lead to productivity gains because of the less time, energy, and resources devoted to repairing the effects of psychological breakdown due to wars, dominance, depression, etc.? Once these ailments reduced, we will probably have more time available to give course to a constructive curiosity. And on the other hand, the main benefit will probably be individual. More people happy and happier. This last argument could give the impression of taking away all the others. But, in my opinion, the precedent prevails, because it's our responsibility to try to improve our level of happiness and to allow all those of our fellow citizens we wish it to try to do so, because it may be one of the essential conditions for perpetuation as species. To conclude, okay, all we know is that we still don't know much yet. And this issue is extremely complex and carries a great risk, and which I have not had the time of reported here. Yet we make continuous progress, both in understanding these processes and in our ability to intervene on them. The stakes are huge. Without this, without the handling of our Paleolithic preconditioning, nothing will ever change, and humanity will continue to suffer from the main ailments that have overwhelmed it forever. It is therefore necessary to continue investing heavily in neuroscience research. In the meantime, for lack of a satisfactory technical solution, and without giving up in the list to pursue their research, the transhumanists could be part of those who advocate the attention to dominance. Being attentive to one's own tendency to dominance may result in trying to diminish it. However, diminishing its dominance has the effect of making more serene its social relations, friendly or still in love. This can therefore have an important effect on our access to happiness and allow us from time to time to rest in our race inside the hedonic treadmill. I thank you very much.